The movie begins with two best friends, both an excited Katie and a promiscuous Sloane, who are looking forward to their upcoming trip to the farm. They will be at a farm called Echo Felts in the morning for a trudging month to save up money and go shopping in New York. The next morning they are picked up by Kathy's uncle Jason. He's Jason and they stay at Jason's for the night before heading out to the farm. As they settle into their new place, Sloane suggests that they make up made-up names. During their stay in town, Sloane comes up with the name Heather, and Katie comes up with the name Ripley. The next day, Uncle Jason drops them off at the station where they don't take the bus to Ferrama. Being a policeman, Jason tells them that they have to come up with a secret word in case they get into trouble. The thing is, they have to send a code word at the end of every message. In other words, Jason asks Kathy to send him a new code word in alphabetical order every day. Afterwards, as their uncle leaves, the girls still have to wait for the bus to should arrive in about an hour, and they decide to wait in the cafe. They immediately attract the attention of two guys and introduce themselves by assumed names they didn't come up with last night, and the two men introduce themselves as Jed and Lucas. The brothers offer to give their ride to his place of work, and although Kay resists at first, he later relents. Eventually they climb into the guy's truck, but things don't go as planned. Jed must be passing by the farm where Katie and Sloane work, which knocks the women down and brings them to his house. The girls are met by Jed and Lucas' mother, who invites them over for a cup of tea before heading to the farm. Once they get inside, Kathy gets a message from her uncle, the policeman, from their agreed-upon secret word. She tells him that she's fine. Meanwhile, the two are eating pie and drinking tea, which they probably shouldn't be doing, but they do it anyway. Their vision is blurred. When it turns out there are drugs in the drinks, the girls immediately run to save their lives. Unfortunately, Jed and Lucas manage to knock them down and bring them back to the house. The next day, Katie and Sloane are chained in a panic in the middle of the woods. Jed approaches them and says, "Now you will live here," and provides them with all the things they need, and these clothes, a bed and a toilet. We move on to the next scene, where Katie and Sloane are both overdressed, and Jed's boss Boris shows up and takes Katie's phone to see if anyone knows their whereabouts. At this point he discovers that Katie and Sloane have lied about their names as well as the code word they used in the text message. Kathy and Sloane are eventually forced to tell him that the word apple is a safe word. As Katie and Sloane prepare to take a shower, the town sheriff shows up with a gun at the ready, and, as it turns out, the sheriff is a piece of shit human trafficker, and he has come to rape one of the women. After the evil sheriff has had his fill, Sloane broadcasts to a shocked Kathy to calm her down. On the other side of town, Uncle Jason becomes worried because the last message he received from Kathy also contains the code word she used yesterday. Back in the woods, Jet and Lucas welcome another visitor, Mark. He chooses Sloane and brings her to the trailer. Unsurprisingly, Mark is a bit of a nutcase. Jason finally calls Sloane and Katie at work and finds out that they never showed up for work yesterday. Convinced they are in trouble, he rushes out to look for them. Meanwhile, Sloane and Katie's condition gets even worse. Jet and Lucas rush to cover the girls' heads as the next visitor approaches. Dude in a pig mask picks Sloane out and gets her in the trailer. After he leaves, it's Katie's turn to console a shocked Sloane. We don't know for sure what the dude with the pig mask did to her, as he looks even more traumatized. In the next scene, Uncle Jason reaches the sheriff's office and comes face to face with the town rapist, the sheriff we saw earlier. Here we learn that the uncle is not really just a cop, but actually an FBI agent. He voices his concerns and is convinced that his niece has been kidnapped. To make the plot even more interesting, for some reason the FBD uncle decides to tell the sheriff how he knows they're in trouble because Kathy didn't use the new code word she later sent in a text message. Back in the woods, Sheriff apparently informs the kidnappers that Kathy's uncle is an FBI agent, and that Kathy lied to them about the code word, not wanting the FBI to dig into their human trafficking business. Boss Boris orders them both killed and their bodies dumped. Without their knowledge, Kathy dries up the conversation. While this is going on, Uncle FPP decides to visit the cafe where he last dropped Kathy and Sloane off. He then asks Barista what he knows. Barista remembers in great detail what truck Katie and Sloane left in. The next day, Kathy informs Sloane that the kidnappers plan to kill them soon. Afterwards, visitors arrive, leaving Mark to watch them. Kathy takes this opportunity to seduce him, and once he's close enough, she rips his throat open with her teeth. The girl is freed from her chains, and soon after, the sheriff arrives on the scene, presumably to kill them as well. But as soon as he gets out of the car, Katie and Sloane steal his car. The girls return to town and head to the hardware store to get ready. They ask the cashier if he knows Boris, the man with the blue truck. Costa gives his address on the other side of town. Uncle Jason continues his investigation. After visiting the city's auto insurance building today, he makes up a story about an accidental collision with a blue truck and asks who it belongs to. When Boris returns home, Katie and Sloane sneak up on him and throw a bunch of tennis balls with nails at him, injuring him badly. Now it is Boris's turn to beg for his life. He even offers his money in exchange for keeping him alive. At this point, Uncle Jason pulls up to Boris's house. Kathy and Sloane begin questioning him about the identity of the man in the pig mask. When Boris refuses to reveal it, Kathy and Sloane take a homemade spear and shove it up his ass, which eventually kills him. When Uncle Jason finally enters the house, it turns out that Kathy and Sloane are gone. Seeing Boris dying, Jason takes him to the hospital. In the next scene, Sheriff informs Jason that Boris has not survived. Meanwhile, Kathy and Sloane stop in front of a church, and we learn that the dude in the pig mask is actually the town priest. Sloane enters the church and comes face to face with her rapist. With Katie's help, the two best friends defeat the scoundrel. When the girls leave, we see that they are now content, but when they stop and get out of the car, it turns out that the dude in the pig mask is chained to the trucks. As a final blow, they douse it in gasoline and set it on fire. While driving away, Jason is held captive by the sheriff at the time. Worse, it turns out that the sheriff has captured two new young women and, luckily, Katie and Sloane come to the rescue. They tie up the sheriff and proceed to torture him with a game of Russian roulette. The sheriff begins to proclaim how sorry he is for what happened. Katie ignores him and finishes him off with a blow to the head. Kathy and Sloane then release the girls and Uncle Jason. Kathy and Sloane then visit Jed and Luca's mother's house and decide to pump her up the same way she pumped him up a few days ago. They tie her up and take her to the basement where Jed is tied up. They start hitting him over the head with baseball bats, and the mother is forced to watch. Then they also led them to Lucas, who is also tied to a chair. However, instead of beating him to death, they untie him, hand him a bat, and force him to beat his own mother. When he almost beats his mother, the girl shoots him and positions the guy's body as if he had killed himself. It turns out that they plan to pin the murders on him. In desperation, the mother offers them money in exchange for keeping her alive, but instead of sparing her, Katie takes a lawnmower and cuts her down hard. In the last scene, Uncle Jason drives up to Kathy's house to pick her and Sloane up. Some time seems to have passed. Katie and Sloane disembark at the airport, excited to go to New York.